Here is the tale of Cloud Elizabeth, the weaver of the troposphere, one of the strange angels. The genesis of vapour. Before she had a name, she was the ocean. In the earliest epoch, before the separation of the firmament, the world was a single heavy body of water. But the sun, in its jealous love, sought to pull the ocean closer. It kissed the surface with such fervour that the water surrendered its weight, turning into mist, rising to meet the heat. Cloud Elizabeth was born in that middle place, the interstice. She is the daughter of the ocean's depth and the sun's fire. She is the ocean that learned to fly. She is not an angel of feathers and bone, nor a messenger of any distinct god. She is a sky entity composed entirely of condensed longing. The lore of the high-altitude mystics calls her kind the strange angels, beings who do not guard human souls, but rather guard the atmosphere itself, ensuring the breath of the world keeps cycling. They do not bleed when cut, they simply disperse, only to gather again when the pressure drops. From the Codex of the Silver Lining 2, The Anatomy of a Strange Angel. As the image reveals, Cloud Elizabeth is barely distinguishable from the medium she inhabits. To look at her is to experience pareidolia, the phenomenon of seeing faces in the nebula. The body. Her form is fluid smoke and grey vapour. She possesses the suggestion of a human female form, ribs that mimic the curvature of cirrus clouds, a face that looks upward toward the stratosphere. But she is hollow. The reach. Her hands are always open, fingers trailing into wisps. She does not grasp, she releases. 12/19/25 2:29 a.m. Google Gemini htgemini.google.com/448 The composition. She is made of the water mortals have wept, the smoke from their fires and the breath they have exhaled. She is literally composed of the history of the world below her. The tale of the great silence. The legend of Cloud. Elizabeth is most often told in relation to the era of the Great Silence. Centuries ago, humanity stopped speaking their truths. A great paranoia had swept the land. Lovers lied to one another, kings lied to their subjects, and children whispered only to the dark. The air became stagnant. You see, the strange angels feed on the vibration of sound and truth. Without it, the atmosphere grew heavy, toxic, and still. The winds died. The rain ceased. The sky turned a bruised, silent purple. Cloud Elizabeth, drifting low over the mountain-tops, felt the suffocation of the world. While her sisters, the Thunderheads, wanted to scour the earth with lightning to restart the heart of the world, Elizabeth chose a different path. She chose descent. The descent. She lowered herself from the heavens, violating the primary law of the strange angels, never touched the ground. As she sank, she compressed. She became a dense, sentient fog that rolled through the valleys and into the stone streets of the cities. She moved through the open windows of sleeping mortals. She did not harm them, she inhaled them. She breathed in their nightmares. She absorbed the words they were too afraid to say. She took the smoke of their hidden candles and the steam from their cold kettles. The transmutation. In the image you have provided, we see the moment of transmutation. Having absorbed the silent heaviness of the world, Elizabeth attempted to rise back to her domain, but she was too heavy with human sorrow. She began to tear apart. The swirling greys and browns in her form are the impurities of the earth, the dust, the ash, the lies. 12/19/25 2:29 a.m. Google Gemini, gemini.google.com/app/4484b2b6 2:19. She reached upward, her hand breaking the barrier of the lower clouds. She screamed without a mouth, a sound that manifested as the first crack of thunder the world had heard in years. In that struggle, she purified what she had taken. She turned the stagnant, toxic silence into a violent, beautiful storm. The rain that fell that day tasted like salt tears and smelled like wood smoke. It washed the world clean, forcing humanity back inside, huddling together, finding their voices again to comfort one another. Ivor, the eternal drift cloud, Elizabeth survived, but she was changed. She is no longer pure white. She carries the tint of the storm, the darker hues of smoke and shadow. She is the patron saint of confusion and clarity, the mental fog that clears just before a breakthrough. The unspoken. She carries the prayers that are never said aloud. Transience, the reminder that everything changes shape, but nothing truly disappears. If you look up on a day when the weather is turning, when the sky is that peculiar mix of slate grey and blinding sunlight, and you see a shape twisting in the updraft. That is her. She is dancing in the thermal currents, forever caught between the earth she saved and the heaven that finds her too heavy to hold. This is the codex of the aerosol, the lost mythology of the strange angels. While conventional theology looks to the heavens for moral judgment, the sky mystics look up and see only physics and personality. The strange angels are not messengers of a creator. They are the sentient immune system of the planet. They are elemental forces that have gained consciousness through eons of observing the world below. Together with Cloud Elizabeth, they form the tropospheric host. Here are the other dominant entities of this pantheon. 12/19/25, 2:29 a.m. Google Gemini, gemini.google.com/app, Sphora B484B6 2EB6 319I. Saint Cyrus of the Needles. Title, The Architect of Ice, the High Cold, the Silent Cutter. Altitude 20,000 plus feet, the stratosphere's edge. The Manifestation. Where Cloud Elizabeth is fluid and smoky, Saint Cyrus is sharp, geometric and crystalline. He appears not as a human form, but as a vast skeletal structure made of millions of ice prisms. Occasionally, pilots report seeing a great glass spider spanning miles of thin air, a lattice of frozen geometry that catches the light and refracts it into sundogs and halos. The domain Saint Cyrus governs structure and detachment. He lives where the air is too thin to support human life. He represents the cold logic of the universe. He does not care for the prayers of mortals because he cannot hear them. Sound does not travel well in his domain. The myth, it is said that Saint Cyrus is the one who stitches the sky to the black void of space. Without his constant weaving of ice crystals, the atmosphere would unravel and drift away into the cosmos. He is the guardian of the barrier. The glitch. Sometimes, when the sun hits him at the perfect angle, he creates the parhelion, mock suns. Myth says this is Saint Cyrus trying to create his own star, jealous of the sun's dominance. Relationship to Elizabeth. He despises her. He views Cloud Elizabeth as impure because she dips low enough to touch the mountains and taste the smoke of humans. He calls her the Heavy One. 2. The Oxide Prince. Title, The Smog Eater, the Copper Throat, the New God. Altitude, the planetary boundary layer, city level. The Manifestation. The Oxide Prince is the youngest of the strange angels, born only during the Industrial Revolution. He is not white or grey, but a bruised, sickly orange and burnt umber. His form is heavy, sluggish, and oily. If you were to touch him, your hand would come back coated in soot. He often takes the shape of a crouching giant atop skyscrapers, inhaling the exhaust from ventilation systems. 12/19/25, 2:29 a.m. Google Gemini hb/gemini.google.com/app 48484-6. The domain. He governs industry, decay, and adaptation. While the other angels seek to purify the air, the Oxide Prince feeds on the poison. He is the patron entity of cities, factories, and traffic jams. He finds beauty in the way the sun turns red through a haze of pollution. The myth. The lore states that the Oxide Prince is actually saving humanity from itself. He acts as a liver for the sky, filtering out the worst of the toxins by absorbing them into his own body. He is in constant pain, a martyr of progress. The bargain. Sorcerers of the modern age, corporate magi, say that if you burn the right chemicals, the Oxide Prince will grant you wealth, but he will take your breath, asthma, lung sickness as payment. Relationship to Elizabeth. They are tragic lovers. Cloud Elizabeth tries to wash him clean with rain, but he is hydrophobic. Her water slides off his oily skin. They can never truly merge. 3. Keranos, the Shattered Title. The Flash King. The 1-second saint. The Scream Altitude. Vertical, connects ground to sky instantly. The Manifestation. Keranos has no permanent form. He exists only for a millisecond at a time. He is the embodiment of lightning. When he manifests, he appears as a jagged, blindingly bright nervous system, a frantic scribble of white-hot energy connecting the clouds to the earth. The domain. He governs rage, release, and sudden inspiration. He is the chaotic force that breaks the tension built up by the other angels. When the atmosphere becomes too charged with unspoken energy, Keranos is born. He screams, he strikes, and he dies, all in the blink of an eye. 12/19/25, 2:29 a.m. Google Gemini /gemini.google.com/app 4848484B6EB659. The myth. The Litany of the Flash claims that Keranos is not one being, but a lineage of billions. Each lightning strike is a new entity, born with total knowledge of the universe, who immediately kills himself in despair at seeing the state of the world. The thunder is not his weapon, it is his death rattle. The fulgurite, when he strikes sand and creates glass, fulgurite, that is his corpse. Occultists prize these fossils of a god for high-energy rituals. Relationship to Elizabeth, he is her weapon and her burden. Cloud Elizabeth carries the potential for Keranos within her belly, the charge. When she can no longer hold the weight of her grief, she gives birth to him, allowing him to strike the earth. 4. The Zephyr Twins, Boreas and Notus. Title, The Couriers, the Invisible Hands, the Pushers. Altitude, all levels. The manifestation, unlike the others, the Zephyr Twins are strictly invisible. They are wind. They can only be seen by what they touch, the bending of the trees, the ripple on the lake, the hair whipping across a face. In the spirit realm, they look like long, ribbon-like transparent eels, constantly swimming through the air. The domain. They govern change, travel, and chaos. They are the tricksters of the pantheon. They do not create weather. They move it. They are responsible for pushing Cloud Elizabeth to places she does not want to go. The myth. Legend says the twins are playing a game of catch with the planet. Boreas, the north wind, is cold and cruel, trying to freeze the world still. Notus, the south wind, is warm and erratic, trying to melt everything into chaos. The weather we experience is simply the friction of their eternal wrestling match. Relationship to Elizabeth. They are her tormentors and her chauffeurs. Elizabeth has no locomotion of her own. She is at the mercy of the twins. Sometimes they tear her apart for sport, wind shear, scattering her essence across miles, forcing her to slowly rebuild herself. The hierarchy of the sky. If one were to draw the sigil of the strange angels, it would look like a vertical ladder. 1. Top, Saint Cyrus, the detached intellect, watching from the edge of space. 12/19/22:29 a.m. Google Gemini, gemini.google.com/4AB4848B4A2B6192. Middle, Cloud Elizabeth, the heart, the emotional center, the vapor. 3. Vertical axis, Keranos, the spark that connects high and low. 4. Bottom, the oxide prince, the body, the filth, the connection to humanity. 5. Permeating all, the Zephyr Twins, the force that moves the pieces. A ritual of recognition. To invoke the attention, though not the favor, of the strange angels, the old text suggests the following. Go to a high place when the barometer is falling. Turn your back to the wind. Breathe out fully until your lungs are empty. Wait until your body panics for air. In that second of panic, you are empty enough to be seen by them. Inhale sharply. That first breath is their communion. Vera didn't use a crystal ball. She used a customized Doppler radar rig running on a triple-monitor setup in her micro-studio apartment in Seattle. She wasn't a witch in the way the TikTok girls were witches. There were no jars of moon water on her sill, no sage burning in an abalone shell. Vera was a senior air quality analyst for the Environmental Protection Agency, Region 10. Her magic was data. Her grimoire was the changing jagged line of the barometric pressure graph. But she had noticed the ghost variable. For 3 years, Vera had been tracking anomalies in the Pacific Northwest weather patterns. Low-pressure systems that stalled for no thermodynamic reason. Smog banks that moved against the prevailing wind, as if they were hunting. Lightning strikes that hit the same abandoned radio tower 12 times in a single minute. The math didn't add up. The physics were broken. It was a Tuesday in November when she found the key. It wasn't in a leather-bound tome, but in a corrupted PDF file buried in a folder of scanned meteorological journals from the 1890s. The file was titled Observations on the 12/19/25 2:29 a.m. Google Gemini, h/gemini.google.com/app 4AB48484B719 tropospheric host. The author was a madman named Elias Vance, a balloonist who had ascended too high too fast and came back down without his hearing, babbling about the ladies of the vapor. Vera read the text. Then she looked at her monitors. Then she looked out the window at the brown haze choking the skyline. The Oxide Prince, she whispered. The name felt heavy in her mouth, like tasting a penny. The invocation of the sensor. Vera grabbed her gear. She didn't take a wand. She took a portable particulate matter counter, PM2.5 sensor, and a handheld ham radio modified to listen to VLF, very low frequency. the band usually reserved for submarines and lightning. She took the elevator to the roof of her building, 40 stories up. The city was suffocating. A temperature inversion had trapped the exhaust of 3 million cars against the ground. The air was a bruised orange. Most people saw smog. Vera, armed with the knowledge of the codex, saw a body. She turned on her particulate counter. The numbers spiked, 150 AQI, 180, 200. "I see you," she said, holding the device up like a talisman. "I know you're not just chemistry, you're him." The copper throat. The wind shifted. It didn't blow past her. It blew at her. The smog seemed to coalesce, thickening into sluggish, roiling shapes near the ventilation units of the neighbouring skyscraper. A face, vast and oily, seemed to press against the invisible glass of the atmosphere. The oxide prince was curious. Vera's heart hammered against her ribs. This was the modern witchcraft, the recognition of the sentient industrial byproduct, the ritual of the empty lung. She checked her phone. The radar showed a massive front moving in from the ocean, a clean, white violence slamming into the coast. Cloud Elizabeth. Vera realized what was happening. It wasn't just a storm, it was a territorial dispute. The Lady of Vapor was coming to scour the Oxide Prince from his throne. 12/19/25, 2:29 a.m. Google Gemini https gemini.google.com/4AB484B62B619. Vera tuned her radio to 10 kilohertz. Static hissed, sounding like frying bacon. Then a whistle, a long descending tone that vibrated in her teeth. The Whistlers. The song of the magnetosphere. She remembered the ritual from the text. Turn your back to the wind. Breathe out until you panic. Vera faced the ocean. The first edge of the storm wall was visible, a towering cliff of slate-grey clouds boiling with internal energy. She closed her eyes. She exhaled. She pushed every cubic centimetre of air from her lungs. She pushed until her diaphragm spasmed. She held it. 1 second. The body panics. 2 seconds. The vision blurs. 3 seconds. The barrier drops. In that moment of oxygen deprivation, the veil of biology thinned. Vera opened her eyes and inhaled sharply, gasping in the first breath of the incoming squall. The world shifted. She didn't see clouds anymore. She saw her. Stretching across the horizon was a woman made of cubic miles of mist. Cloud Elizabeth was leaning backward, her hair trailing into rain bands that swept the coastline. Her face was serene, a mask of white nimbostratus, but her hands were clawed with turbulence. Vera felt the connection slam into her. She wasn't controlling the weather. She was the lightning rod grounding the circuit. She felt Elizabeth's intent. Purge. The intervention of Keranos. "You can't just wash him away!" Vera screamed into the gale. Her voice ripped away by the Zephyr twins. She saw them now, translucent eels whipping around her ankles, trying to trip her. "He's too heavy! You'll drown the city!" The cloud form of Elizabeth paused. The sky entity looked down. It was terrifying to be perceived by something that large. To Elizabeth, Vera was a single bacterium pleading for the life of the colony. 12/19/25, 2:29 a.m. /gemini.google.com/4app484849969. Vera looked at her particulate monitor. The Oxide Prince was digging in. The smog was dense, sticky. If the rain hit this hard, it would create an acid slurry. Vera needed a catalyst. She needed to break the tension. She keyed her radio mic. She didn't transmit a voice. She transmitted a feedback loop, a piercing electronic shriek directly into the VLF band. "Keranos!" She mentally projected the name. "Wake up!" The response was instant. The air above the city didn't just crack, it shattered. A blinding vertical scar of white light connected the belly of Cloud Elizabeth to the smog-choked street below. Keranos, the shattered, lived and died in that split second. The thunder that followed knocked Vera to her knees. It was a physical blow, a sonic boom that shook the rivets of the HVAC units. But it did the work. The lightning didn't hit the ground. It hit the tension. It broke the temperature inversion. The heat broke. The air mixed. The aftermath. The rain began. It wasn't the drowning deluge Elizabeth had planned, nor the toxic sludge the prince wanted. It was a steady, rhythmic washing. Vera sat on the wet tar of the roof, soaked to the bone. Her electronics were fried. The radio was smoking. She looked up. The giant face of Cloud Elizabeth was dispersing, losing its definition, returning to simple meteorology. But just before the face dissolved into scud, Vera saw the lips move. There was no sound, only a sudden drop in pressure that popped her ears. Recognition. Vera walked back downstairs to her apartment. She stripped off her wet clothes and sat in front of her monitors. The anomaly was gone. The isobars were smooth. The data was normalizing. 12/19/25, 2:29 a.m. Google Gemini /gemini.google.com/app4ab4884b66 10:19. She opened a new spreadsheet. She didn't label it work. She labeled it liturgy. Vera understood now. The weather wasn't something that happened to the world. It was a conversation. And for the first time in centuries, humanity had joined the chat. She poured herself a glass of water. She watched the condensation form on the glass, tiny captive children of Cloud Elizabeth. "Cheers," she whispered. Outside, the wind howled a reply. This is the continuation of Vera's work, 3 weeks after the rooftop incident. The Grimoire of Excel, Liturgy V41.XLSX. Vera's apartment had changed. The single monitor was gone, replaced by a curved 4-screen array that dominated her living space. The air felt different here too. She ran 3 industrial-grade HEPA filters constantly, creating a clean zone, a neutral ground where she could observe without inhaling the subjects of her study. On the central screen sat the liturgy. It was a massive spreadsheet, color-coded in shades of slate grey, electric blue, and sickly orange. To an untrained eye, it looked like complex climate modeling data. To Vera, it was a dossier on gods. Here is a vertical slice of the active tabs. Tab 1, the host, entity profiles and identifiers. Entity designator, thermodynamic signature, audible range, Hertz. Preferred manifestation, thematic domain, threat level, Vera's scale. E01, Elizabeth. Rapid dew point convergence, 20 Hertz, infrasonic vibration. Massive cumulonimbus structures with grief, cleansing, memory, low. Unless 12/19/25, 2:29 a.m. Google Gemini https://gemini.google.com/4ab4884b66 1190 designator thermodynamic signature audible range Hertz. Preferred manifestation thematic domain level Vera's scale. High moisture, low temp before rain. Human pareidolia. The great wash provoked by E2 oxide prince. Thermal inversion, warm air trapping cold, AQI 150 60 Hz hum, electrical grid resonance, sounds like grinding metal, yellow-brown photochemical smog, oily residue. Stagnation, industry, consumption, territory. High, persistent and invasive E03 Keronis, sudden spikes in CAPE, convective available potential energy, 10 kHz plus, VLF radio bursts, spherics, instantaneous plasma discharge, lightning, rage, catalysis, breaking tension. Extreme volatile, non-negotiable, E04 Zephyr twins, unpredictable wind shear, erratic barometric flux, whistling tones, rapid fluctuating white noise, invisible, observed only through kinetic effect on objects, chaos, transport, disruption, moderate, annoying, rarely lethal. Tab 2, the syntax, predictive rituals. Note, Vera stopped calling them weather patterns. She now called them mood swings. Protocol heavy heart, predicting Elizabeth. If local barometric pressure drops 3 millibars in 1 hour and humidity rises above 85% without corresponding surface temperature increase. 12/19/25, 2:29 a.m. Google Gemini /gemini.google.com/app/484b84edb6 12:19 then E01 is manifesting sorrow. Expect prolonged gentle rain. Action, do not interfere. She needs to cry. Protocol choking the prince. If surface wind speed drops to 2 miles per hour and a layer of warm air sits at 2,000 feet capping the city, and networked purple air sensors show uniform spike in PM 2.5, then E02 is feeding. The city is trapped. Action, prepare VLF transmitter. If AQI hits 300, consider invoking E03, Keraunos, to break the cap. Protocol the argument, current status. Observing a stalemate between E01 and E02 over the Puget Sound convergence zone. Elizabeth wants to push inland. The prince is holding the urban heat island hostage. Forecast, volatile. High probability of Zephyr twin interference turning this into a chaotic windstorm. Vera took a sip of lukewarm coffee, her eyes scanning the real-time data feed. The numbers were holding steady. It was a quiet Tuesday, until the sensors inside her apartment went red. 2. The visitation of soot. It started with smell. Usually, Vera's apartment smelled of ozone from the air purifiers and stale coffee, but at 11:42 p.m. a new scent invaded. It was sharp and metallic, like chewing on aluminum foil mixed with the greasy undertone of diesel exhaust. Vera spun in her chair. The central HEPA filter unit, a towering monolith in the corner, was labouring. Its fan whined in a higher register. The air quality indicator light on the front of the unit, usually a calm blue, flickered to purple, then a hard, warning red. PM 2.5 indoor spike, 220 meg, 12/19/25, 2:29 a.m. Google login GP. /gemini.google.com//44able6A2EB6. 13.9 possible, Vera muttered. Her windows were sealed with silicone. Her door had a draft stopper. She was in a pressurized bubble. She grabbed her handheld particulate counter and walked toward the kitchen. The numbers climbed higher the closer she got to the stove hood, the ventilation output. A sound came from the metal ductwork above the stove. Not a bang, but a slithering, scratching sound, like sand pouring down a metal chute. He's inside the building's ventilation. Vera's heart hammered. This wasn't weather. This was a break-in. The range hood vent shuddered. A puff of dark brown dust exploded outward, coating the stovetop. Vera coughed, retreating, tasting the metallic tang on her tongue. The dust didn't settle normally. It seemed magnetically charged, clinging together, swirling in the microcurrents of the kitchen air. It was heavy, oily soot, the kind you scrape off the inside of a 90-year-old chimney. It began to coalesce on the white enamel of her stovetop. Vera pulled out her phone and opened the camera app, zooming in from a safe distance. The soot was arranging itself. It wasn't forming a face. The oxide prints was too crude for that level of detail. It was forming a map. It was a crude, jagged diagram of downtown Seattle, rendered in filth. She recognized the outline of the coast, the major highway arteries drawn as thick, greasy smears. And right in the center, where her apartment building stood, the soot piled higher, forming a dense, black, cancerous lump. Vera realized it wasn't a threat. It was a territorial claim. She looked at her liturgy spreadsheet on the distant screen. Protocol chokehold. The prince was feeding, but why come inside? She approached the stove slowly. The heat radiating from the soot pile was palpable. It was exothermic, burning slowly without flame. 12/19/25, 2:29 a.m. Google Gemini HTT's gemini.google.com/48484B6A2EB6. 14 Vera needed to respond. She couldn't use lightning inside her kitchen. She had to speak his language, the language of industry. She opened the cabinet under the sink and grabbed a bottle of high-grade isopropyl alcohol and a barbecue lighter. You want this space? Vera whispered to the greasy map on her stove. You want to mark your territory in my home? She squirted a circle of alcohol around the black lump marking her building. The soot hissed as the liquid hit it. I'm not part of your smog bank, you ancient bastard. I'm the filter. She clicked the lighter. The alcohol ignited with a whoosh, a ring of clean blue fire encircling the prince's manifestation. The soot pile inside the ring didn't burn away. It writhed. The oily particles seemed to scream silently as the clean heat compressed them. The vent above shook violently one last time, and then with a sound like a massive rattling inhale, the presence sucked back up into the ductwork. The blue fire died down. The stovetop was scorched. The soot map was gone, save for the perfectly clean circle in the middle where Vera had burned her answer. Vera leaned against the counter, trembling. She walked back to her computer console. She opened the liturgy spreadsheet and navigated to a new tab she hadn't used yet. Tab 5, First Contact Protocols. She typed an entry, Incident Log, Deck 12. Entity, E02, Oxide Prints. Method, physical intrusion via HVAC ventilation, manifestation of particulate matter into crude cartography. Message decoded, territorial assertion over my location. Response, controlled burn isopropyl alcohol, denial of territory. Note, he tastes like old pennies and death. He knows where I live now. We are no longer just observing. We are negotiating. 12/19/5, 2:29 a.m. Google Gemini, heygemini.google.com/4AB484B615/19. The invasion of her kitchen was only the opening salvo. By the next morning, the Oxide Prince had locked down the entire city. Vera woke up to a notification on her phone. Air quality alert. Hazardous. AQI 340. Avoid outdoors. She looked out her window. Seattle was gone. In its place was a wall of opaque, bruised orange vapor. The Space Needle was just a ghostly spinal column barely visible in the soup. This wasn't just weather, it was a siege. The prince was sulking after being burned, and in his petulance he was choking 3 million people. Vera grabbed her field kit. The apartment, her clean zone, felt fragile now. If she stayed, she was just hiding. If she wanted to re-establish the balance, she had to go to the source. She had to go to the port. 3. Into the belly of the beast. The port of Seattle was the Oxide Prince's cathedral. The massive container cranes looked like skeletal priests bowing to the water. The air here was thick with the incense of burning bunker fuel and diesel particulate matter. Vera parked her generic government-issue sedan near a stack of shipping containers. She wore a half-face respirator mask, looking less like a witch and more like a hazmat cleaner. In her hand, she carried the tuning fork, a custom-built directional antenna connected to a signal generator in her backpack. She climbed a maintenance ladder on Crane 4, ascending 50 feet into the haze. The air up here was viscous. It clung to her skin like warm oil. She checked her sensor. PM 2.5, 400 milligram per milligauss. Critical. "All right, you heavy bastard," Vera mumbled into her mask. "Let's talk." She pointed the tuning fork toward the densest part of the smog bank hovering over the container ships. She adjusted the frequency to 60 hertz, the hum of the electrical grid, the prince's heartbeat. She didn't attack. She pinged him. Ping. Ping. 12:19:25, 2:29 a.m. Google Gemini, haste gemini.google.com/app/4A4846doB6. 16 swirled. It didn't disperse, it tightened. The orange haze darkened to a charcoal grey. The prince was answering. Suddenly, the wind stopped. Completely. The sounds of the port, the clanking metal, the distant traffic, dampened as if someone had thrown a heavy wool blanket over the world. Vera felt the pressure drop in her inner ear. She was in the centre of the lung. The smog around the crane solidified. It didn't form a face this time. It formed a hand. A massive 5-fingered claw of soot and exhaust, roughly the size of a bus, coalescing out of the air 10 yards in front of her. It reached. IV, the Zephyr Gambit. Vera didn't flinch. She had anticipated brute force. The prince was a bully. He only knew how to crush. "Protocol Zephyr," she said, tapping the execute key on the tablet strapped to her forearm. She wasn't trying to fight the smog with fresh air. She didn't have enough of it. She was trying to introduce chaos. Her backpack hummed. The signal generator shifted from the low 60 hertz hum to a frantic oscillating screech, a fluctuating tone jumping between 200 hertz and 8 kilohertz. It was the sonic equivalent of a seizure. It was the call of the Zephyr twins. Come out and play. The air rippled. High above the heavy blanket of the prince's smog, the upper atmosphere was restless. The twins, Boreas, the cold north wind, and Notus, the wet south wind, were always fighting, always drifting. They usually ignored the ground, preferring the playground of the jet stream. But Vera's signal was a lure. It mimicked the sound of a pressure vacuum, a hole in the sky that begged to be filled. Whoosh! 12:19:25, 2:29 a.m. Google Gemini https://gemini.com/e48484b6 It started as a whistle in the rigging of the crane. Then a shriek. Boreas arrived first. A dagger of freezing cold air plunged down from the stratosphere, piercing the warm, oily layer of the prince's smog. The result was violent thermodynamics. The massive soot hand reaching for Vera faltered as the cold air sheared through its wrist. The smog swirled into a vortex. Then came Notus. A blast of humid, erratic wind slammed into the crane from the south, colliding with his brother. Vera grabbed the railing of the crane with both hands. The tuning fork was ripped from her grip, tumbling down into the orange abyss below. She didn't care. The ritual was complete. The twins were fighting inside the prince's house. The mixing. The scene at the port turned into a blender. The Zephyr twins, delighted by the sudden proximity, began to wrestle. Boreas tried to freeze the smog. Notus tried to scatter it. The stagnant, heavy air of the Oxide Prince was whipped into a frenzy. The visual was apocalyptic. The orange smog was torn into ribbons. Gaps of blue sky appeared and vanished in seconds. Dust devils made of diesel soot spun across the decks of the container ships. Vera held on for dear life, her coat whipping around her like a flag in a hurricane. She watched her data readout on her wrist. AQI dropping. 300, 250, 180. The prince couldn't hold his shape. He relied on stillness, on the heavy accumulation of filth. The twins were pure kinetic energy. They were shredding him. A deep groaning sound echoed across the bay, the sound of bending metal. The prince was retreating, pulling his essence back into the smokestacks, hiding in the exhaust vents, abandoning the open air. The sky cleared, not gently but violently. The smog was simply evicted. 12/19/25, 229 Angle Gemini, gemini.google.com/app, 4AB48484B6 to EBIS 1819 VIV. The debt. 20 minutes later, Vera sat in the driver's seat of her car, shaking. Her mask was on the passenger seat, the filters black with soot. The air outside was crisp, cold, and shockingly clear. The twins had bored a hole straight through the stagnation, allowing the clean upper air to crash down. She picked up her phone. She opened the liturgy spreadsheet. She navigated to tab 4, Debt and Favor. Transaction log, Deck 13. Entity invoked E04, Zephyr Twins. Target, E02, Oxide Prince. Result, tactical dispersal of smog bank. Localized wind shear event, 70 mph gusts. Cost, high. Vera looked at the cost column. The strange angels didn't take money. They took balance. She had used chaos to fight stagnation. That meant chaos now held the receipt. As she drove away from the port, she noticed something disturbing. The traffic lights weren't working. They weren't out. They were erratic. Green, red, yellow, flashing in random, nonsensical patterns. A plastic bag danced across the hood of her car, moving with a strange, deliberate intelligence. The wind wasn't dying down. It was following her. The Zephyr Twins hadn't gone back to the stratosphere. They liked the game Vera had started. They liked the ground. Vera gripped the steering wheel. She had cleared the air, but now she had 2 invisible, hyperactive children loose in the city, and they were bored. "One problem at a time," she whispered, merging onto the highway as a gust of wind nearly shoved her into the next lane. One god at a time. 12/19/25, 2:29 am. Google Gemini, gemini.gemini.google.com/app, 4A48B6, 1919.